Story 1. The Congregation of Absence. Marcus Hathaway had been the mail carrier for Thornwick, Pennsylvania for 17 years. The small town nestled in the Allegheny foothills had always been quiet, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where doors remained unlocked and where the biggest excitement was the annual Harvest Festival. Marcus knew every resident by name, knew their routines, their mail patterns, their lives. He'd delivered birth announcements, college acceptance letters, and sympathy cards. He was as much a part of Thornwick as the century-old oak in the town square. The first Tuesday in October started like any other. Marcus loaded his truck at the Thornwick post office at 6:47 a.m., the same time he'd been doing it for nearly 2 decades. The air held that crisp autumn bite, leaves crunching under his boots as he made his way to the truck. Margaret Chen, the postmaster, waved from the window as she always did. Everything was normal. Everything was right. His route took him down Maple Street first, where the Hendersons lived in their blue Colonial. Marcus knew Tom Henderson would be leaving for his accounting firm in Pittsburgh around 7:15, and sure enough, as Marcus pulled up, Tom was backing his Volvo out of the driveway. They exchanged waves. Marcus left the Hendersons' catalogs and bills in their mailbox and continued on. By 8:30 a.m., Marcus had covered a third of his route. He'd seen plenty of residents, Mrs. Kowalski watering her garden, Dave Patterson walking his golden retriever, the Miller twins waiting for their school bus. Thornwick was awake and alive, following its predictable rhythm. Marcus found comfort in that predictability. After his divorce 3 years ago, the routine had been therapeutic. He stopped for his usual coffee break at 9 a.m. at Denise's diner on Main Street. Denise poured his coffee before he even sat down, adding 2 creams just how he liked it. They chatted about the weather, about her grandson's football game, about nothing important and everything familiar. Marcus left at 9:23 a.m., feeling warmed not just by the coffee but by the small-town connection he'd come to cherish. The strangeness began on Birch Lane. Marcus pulled up to the Talbot residence, a white farmhouse with black shutters that had stood since 1887. Richard Talbot, a retired veteran, was always on his porch by this time reading the newspaper. Marcus would hand him his mail directly and they'd discuss whatever political scandal was making headlines. But the porch was empty. The newspaper lay in its plastic sleeve on the front steps untouched. Marcus frowned but didn't think much of it. Maybe Richard was having a slow morning. Maybe he'd slept in. Marcus left the mail in the box and moved on. The next house belonged to the Yamamoto family. Usually their 2 kids would be in the yard, homeschooled by their mother Sarah. Marcus could typically hear them laughing, playing, learning. But the house was silent. The curtains were drawn. No car in the driveway, though Sarah rarely left during school hours. At the Rodriguez house, the same thing. Silence. Stillness. The kind of quiet that felt wrong. By the time Marcus reached Sycamore Court, his stomach had knotted with unease. House after house stood empty, not abandoned. He could see cars in some driveways, could see recent signs of life, coffee mugs on porch railings, a child's bike lying on its side in a yard. But no people, not a single person. Marcus checked his watch, 10:47 a.m. He'd seen dozens of people earlier that morning. Where had everyone gone? He pulled out his phone and called the post office. It rang 6 times before going to voicemail. He called the diner. No answer. He tried Tom Henderson's cell phone. Voicemail. He called his ex-wife Diane, who lived 2 towns over. She picked up on the second ring. "Marcus? What's wrong?" The sound of her voice flooded him with relief. "Diane, thank God. I need you to do me a favor. Can you look up Thornwick on the news? See if something happened? An evacuation or something?" "What are you talking about?" "Everyone's gone. I'm on my route and there's nobody here." Silence on the line then. "Marcus, are you feeling okay? Did you take your blood pressure medication?" I'm fine, I'm serious. The whole town is empty. He heard her keyboard clicking. I'm not seeing anything. No news about Thornwick at all. Are you sure you're not? I'm sure. I saw people this morning, but now they've all vanished. More keyboard clicking. Marcus, I'm looking at traffic cameras from Route 22 near Thornwick. I'm seeing cars, people driving. The town's not empty. Marcus looked around at the silent houses. Diane, I'm telling you, why don't you head back to the post office? Maybe you need to take the rest of the day. He wanted to argue but couldn't find the words. Yeah, okay. I'll call you later. Marcus turned his truck around and headed back toward Main Street. The wrongness intensified with every block. He passed Sherman Park. The playground equipment stood motionless, swings hanging perfectly still in the breezeless air. He passed the high school. No cars in the student lot, no motion behind the windows. Then he saw someone. An old woman stood at the corner of Main and Fifth, wearing a long gray dress that looked like it belonged to another century. She stood perfectly motionless, facing away from him. Relief washed through Marcus. He wasn't alone. He wasn't crazy. He pulled up beside her and rolled down his window. Excuse me, ma'am. Do you know what's going on? Where is everyone? The woman didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him. Ma'am? Marcus put the truck in park and got out. As he approached her, something about her stillness made his skin crawl. He walked around to face her. The woman's eyes were open, but white, like marble. Her skin had a waxy quality and she wasn't breathing. She wasn't alive, but she was standing. Marcus stumbled backward, his heart hammering. He got back in his truck, locked the doors, and drove faster than he should have toward the post office. The building looked normal from the outside. Margaret's car was still in the lot. Marcus burst through the door. Margaret! The post office was empty. But on the sorting table sat his morning coffee from the diner. Still hot, still steaming. Beside it was a note in handwriting he didn't recognize. We are where we've always been. You are where you shouldn't be. Marcus's hands shook as he picked up the note. The paper was old, yellowed like something that had been written decades ago. He heard a sound behind him and spun around. Margaret stood in the doorway to the back room. Relief flooded through him again. Margaret, Jesus, something's wrong with this town. Everyone's... He stopped. Margaret was staring at him with those same white marble eyes, and she was translucent, like he could see through her to the wall behind. You weren't supposed to come back, she said, but her mouth didn't move. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere. The route was supposed to keep you away until sunset. What the hell is happening? Thornwick has been gone for 43 years, Marcus. The town was evacuated in 1981. Chemical spill from the factory. Everyone left, but some of us stayed behind in the way that ghosts stay. We've been keeping the town alive in the in-between place, keeping it going for ourselves. That's insane. I've been working here for 17 years. Have you? Margaret's form flickered. Or have you been driving the same route every day through a memory? Your wife left you because you wouldn't leave Thornwick. Your family stopped calling because they couldn't reach you. You haven't aged in 17 years, Marcus. You've been trapped in the day before the evacuation, living it over and over, and we've been living it with you. We needed someone to keep delivering mail to people who aren't there. Someone to keep the town alive. Marcus looked at his hands. They looked the same as always. But when he thought back, really thought back, he couldn't remember what he'd done last weekend or last month. He couldn't remember last Christmas. Everything blurred together into an endless string of mail routes and coffee breaks and waves to neighbors. The others who were like you, they all eventually saw the truth and broke free, Margaret continued. But they left holes in the fabric. We needed you to stay. We changed your route this morning, trying to keep you away from the empty parts. But you came back early. You saw. I'm leaving. Marcus backed toward the door. You can try. But Marcus, you've been dead for 17 years. You died in the chemical spill with the rest of us. You just didn't know it. Marcus ran to his truck and drove. He drove toward the town limits, toward Route 22, toward escape. But no matter how far he drove, he kept ending up back on Main Street. The sun hadn't moved in the sky. His gas gauge hadn't changed. And now, as he looked in his rearview mirror, he saw them, all the residents of Thornwick, standing in the street behind him, watching with white marble eyes. He tried calling Diane again. The number didn't exist. He tried leaving again. Same result. As the truth settled into his bones, Marcus noticed something else. His reflection in the rearview mirror was beginning to fade. He could see the seat behind him through his own body. No, he whispered, but his voice sounded far away. By the time the sun finally began to set, something Margaret had said wouldn't happen until he stopped trying to leave. Marcus understood. He was the mail carrier for a town that existed between moments, between life and death, between memory and reality. He'd been delivering mail to ghosts, and he'd been a ghost himself all along. The next morning at 6:47 a.m. exactly, Marcus loaded his truck at the Thornwick post office. Margaret waved from the window. Everything was normal. Everything was right. And Marcus began his route again, because in Thornwick the mail must always be delivered, the routines must always be followed, and the dead must always pretend they're alive. Forever. Story 2. The Preservation of Pine Hollow. Dr. Sarah Whitmore arrived in Pine Hollow, Pennsylvania on a gray Thursday in November 2019. The small town of roughly 800 residents had hired her as their new general practitioner after old Dr. Brennan finally retired at 83. Sarah was 36, recently divorced and looking for a fresh start away from Philadelphia's overwhelming pace. Pine Hollow seemed perfect, quiet, scenic, the kind of place where she could rebuild her life and actually make a difference in a small community. The clinic was a converted Victorian house on Chestnut Street, painted pale yellow with white trim. It had the charm Sarah had been hoping for, complete with original hardwood floors and high ceilings. The previous week, she'd met with the town council, Mayor Patricia Holbrook, Police Chief Daniel Werner, and 3 other council members whose names blurred together in Sarah's nervous excitement. They'd been welcoming, almost eager to have her. "We're so glad you've chosen Pine Hollow," Mayor Holbrook had said, her smile warm and genuine. "We need fresh blood in this town." An odd way to phrase it, Sarah had thought at the time, but she dismissed it as small-town quirk. Her first month went smoothly. She saw patients with ordinary ailments, flu, diabetes management, high blood pressure, the occasional sprained ankle. The residents were friendly and trusting. Mrs. Eleanor Pritchard brought her homemade apple pie. The Kowalski family invited her to their Sunday dinner. Teenagers from the high school waved when they saw her on the street. Sarah felt welcomed in a way she hadn't in years, but she began noticing peculiarities. Every patient she saw was in remarkably good health for their age. The elderly residents had the vital signs of people decades younger. 80-year-old Frank Morrison had the heart rate and blood pressure of a 50-year-old. 76-year-old Grace Chen could have passed for 60. Even the younger residents seemed unusually healthy. No chronic illnesses, no genetic disorders, nothing beyond the most basic ailments. "You folks must have good genes here," Sarah joked with Frank during his checkup in early December. Frank's expression had flickered with something she couldn't quite read. Something like that. The second peculiarity was the lack of children. Pine Hollow had a school that served kindergarten through 12th grade, but Sarah had only met perhaps 15 children total. For a town of 800, that ratio seemed impossibly low. When she mentioned it to her nurse, Linda Cosgrove, the woman had smiled tightly. Young folks tend to move away. Not much opportunity here. But no one's having children? Some things just work out that way. The conversation had felt like a door closing. The truth revealed itself on a frigid evening in mid-January. Sarah was working late, catching up on paperwork, when she heard the clinic's back door open. She hadn't locked it yet, assuming no one would come by at 8:30 p.m. Footsteps echoed through the hallway, urgent, stumbling. Hello? The clinic's closed, but if it's an emergency? A young woman burst into Sarah's office, maybe 22 or 23, wearing a heavy winter coat and hiking boots. Her face was flushed from cold and exertion, her eyes wide with fear. Please, you have to help me. I'm Emily Patterson. I was hiking near the state forest and got lost, ended up here. My phone's dead. Can I use your phone? I need to call someone to pick me up. Sarah stood immediately. Of course. Are you hurt? Do you need... I'm fine, just lost. Please, the phone. Something in Emily's desperation made Sarah hesitate, but she handed over her cell phone. Emily's hands shook as she dialed. The call went straight to voicemail. Shit. Okay. Is there a bus station any way out of town tonight? Not until morning. Pine Hollow's pretty isolated, but I can drive you to the next town over if you need... The clinic's front door burst open. Mayor Holbrook strode in, followed by Chief Werner and 3 other men Sarah recognized as council members. Their faces were grave. Dr. Whitmore, the mayor said calmly. Please step away from the young lady. Emily backed toward the corner. What is this? Sarah's instincts screamed danger. What's going on? This doesn't concern you, doctor. This is a town matter. Chief Werner moved toward Emily with a syringe in his hand. Stop! Sarah positioned herself between them. You can't just... What are you doing? Preserving Pine Hollow, Mayor Holbrook said simply. As we have for 137 years. Emily tried to run, but 2 of the men grabbed her. She screamed and fought, and Sarah lunged forward to help her, but Mayor Holbrook caught Sarah's arm with surprising strength. You should watch, Doctor. You need to understand how things work here. Chief Werner injected Emily with the syringe's contents. The young woman's struggles weakened, her eyes rolling back. They carried her out of the clinic like she weighed nothing. Sarah's whole body trembled. What did you do to her? I'm calling the police. I am the police, Chief Werner said. Then the state police, the FBI, someone... Mayor Holbrook's expression remained pleasant, almost maternal. Sit down, Dr. Whitmore. Let me explain something about Pine Hollow that's not in the tourist brochures. Sarah wanted to run, to grab her keys and drive until she hit a city with real law enforcement. But 6 people stood between her and the door, and something in their collective calm was more terrifying than violence would have been. She sat. Mayor Holbrook pulled up a chair across from her. In 1883, Pine Hollow was dying. Coal mines had played out. Young people were leaving. Disease was rampant. We had maybe 100 residents left, most of them elderly. A stranger came through town that winter, called himself Dr. Thaddeus Crane. He offered us a solution, a way to preserve the town forever. What kind of solution? An exchange. Every 25 years, we provide him with 7 healthy young people. In return, Pine Hollow never dies. Our buildings don't decay. Our residents don't age normally. Disease rarely touches us, and the town sustains itself in ways that defy economics. We're a bubble outside normal time, Dr. Whitmore, protected, preserved. Sarah's mouth went dry. You're telling me you kidnap people and give them to some, what, demon? Serial killer? We don't know what Dr. Crane is exactly. He's never explained. But every 25 years, on January 31st, he returns. We provide 7 individuals between the ages of 20 and 30, all in perfect health. They're never seen again. And in return, Pine Hollow continues. Our children grow to adulthood, then stop aging. Our elderly live decades beyond normal spans. We're a family frozen in time, Dr. Whitmore. Immortal in our way. That's insane. You're talking about human sacrifice. We're talking about survival, the preservation of an entire community. 7 lives in exchange for 800 every quarter century. The mathematics are quite favorable. Sarah's mind raced. The hikers, the missing persons I've seen in regional news. That's you. You're luring people here. We mark trails that lead to Pine Hollow. We make sure our town appears on GPS systems along back roads. We're friendly and welcoming. Most lost travelers accept our hospitality and never suspect. By the time they realize something's wrong, it's too late. Mayor Holbrook leaned forward. Emily was number 6. We need one more before January 31st. That's in 2 weeks. I won't be part of this. I'm leaving. I'm reporting all of you. We had hoped you wouldn't need to know. The previous doctors never did. But you're observant, Dr. Whitmore. Too observant, which presents us with a choice. The mayor's smile never wavered. You can remain as our doctor, accept what Pine Hollow is, and continue your life here with full knowledge and protection. You'll age slowly like the rest of us. You'll be part of something ancient and extraordinary. Or you become number 7. The room tilted. Sarah gripped the desk. You can't be serious. We're entirely serious. We don't need a doctor specifically. We're remarkably healthy, as you've noticed. But we like having one. It maintains the illusion of normality. It comforts the elderly residents who remember when doctors mattered. So we'd prefer to keep you. The choice is yours. Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. What happens to them? The 7? Dr. Crane takes them to wherever he's from. What happens after that, we don't ask. We've learned not to ask. Sarah thought of Emily, drugged and helpless somewhere in town. She thought of 6 others being held, waiting for their fate. She thought of running, but where would she go? Her car keys were in her purse across the room. Her phone was in her pocket, but what good would calling do when the police chief was standing right here? I need time to think. You have until tomorrow evening. We'll be watching, of course. If you try to leave Pine Hollow or contact outside authorities, we'll assume you've made your choice. They filed out of the clinic, leaving Sarah alone in the too quiet building. She sat frozen for nearly an hour, her mind cycling through disbelief, horror, and desperate planning. Finally, she grabbed her purse and went to her car. She drove toward the town limits. The road stretched ahead normally until she reached the edge of Pine Hollow's boundaries. Then the pavement simply looped back on itself, impossibly, depositing her on the opposite end of town. She tried 3 different roads, same result. The preservation apparently included making sure no one left without permission. Her cell phone showed full signal, but every call she tried to make failed to connect. Text messages wouldn't send. Even her email returned error messages. Sarah spent the night in her clinic apartment, not sleeping, trying to find a solution that didn't exist. The next evening, Mayor Holbrook returned alone. Have you decided, Dr. Whitmore? Sarah had examined every possibility. Fight. Against what? An entire town? Run? To where when the roads wouldn't let her leave? Refuse and die? Sacrificing herself for strangers who were already doomed? If I stay, if I'm part of this, can I at least give them something? Make it painless? Dr. Crane prefers them conscious, but you can sedate them before the transfer. That's acceptable. Sarah felt something break inside her. Then I'll stay. Mayor Holbrook's smile widened. Excellent. Welcome to the real Pine Hollow, Doctor. That was 6 years ago. Sarah still practices in Pine Hollow. She still treats patients for minor ailments, still receives homemade pies, still waves to neighbors. She's aged perhaps 2 years and 6, just like everyone else. She's watched 3 cycles now, 2020, January 31st, 2021 to 2024 gathering the 7, and January 2025 approaching with its quota still incomplete. She sedates them before Dr. Crane arrives, a tall figure in a black coat who never speaks, who leads the drugged victims into the forest, where they vanish into nothing like they were never real at all. Sarah tells herself she's making it easier for them, making it merciful. She tells herself she had no choice. But late at night, when sleep won't come, she remembers Emily Patterson's terrified face and wonders what kind of doctor she's become. What kind of person trades others' lives for her own immortality in a town that shouldn't exist? The answer, she knows, is a monster, just like everyone else in Pine Hollow. And in 2 weeks, she'll help capture number 7. Because in Pine Hollow, everyone participates. That's the price of preservation. Story 3. The broadcast from Ashford. Kevin Riley had been a long-haul trucker for 12 years, and he prided himself on knowing every highway, back road, and shortcut across Pennsylvania. At 41, he'd logged over 1 million miles, delivered everything from furniture to industrial equipment, and handled routes that would have broken newer drivers. His Peterbilt was his second home, equipped with the latest GPS, a premium sound system, and a CB radio that connected him to the invisible community of drivers who shared the dark American highways. On the night of February 17, 2024, Kevin was hauling a load of manufactured building supplies from Erie to Philadelphia. He'd taken Route 80 east, planning to make Pittsburgh by 11 p.m., grab a few hours of sleep, and finish the route by morning. The weather was clear, traffic was light, and Kevin had his favorite podcast playing, a true crime series about unsolved disappearances. Around 10:30 p.m., somewhere between Brookville and Clearfield, Kevin's phone lost signal. Not unusual in this part of Pennsylvania, cellular coverage got spotty in the rural stretches. The podcast cut out, leaving him in silence except for the diesel engine's rumble. He reached for his CB radio, tuning to Channel 19, the standard trucker channel. Usually he'd hear chatter, drivers warning about speed traps, weather conditions, or just shooting the shit to stay awake. But tonight the channel was silent. Static hissed softly. Kevin adjusted the dial, scanning through channels. Nothing but static until he hit Channel 32. A voice crackled through, male, measured, almost hypnotic in its calmness. Residents of Ashford are reminded that curfew begins at midnight. All citizens must be indoors with lights extinguished. The watchers will be patrolling. This is not a drill, this is not a test. Ashford Emergency Broadcast System, 10:34 p.m. The broadcast clicked off, leaving static. Kevin frowned. He'd never heard of Ashford, Pennsylvania, and he thought he knew every town in the state. Emergency broadcast systems typically went out over radio and television, not CB channels. Something about the message felt wrong. The formal tone, the mention of watchers, the specific timestamp. He grabbed his GPS and typed in Ashford, Pennsylvania. Nothing came up. He tried his phone, forgetting it had no signal. The road ahead was empty, his headlights cutting through darkness and light fog that had rolled in from the surrounding forests. The CB crackled again. Attention Ashford residents. A violation has been detected in Sector 7. The individual has been collected. Reminder, outdoor movement after curfew results in immediate collection. Ashford Emergency Broadcast System, 10:41 p.m. Kevin's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Collection? What the hell did that mean? He checked his mirrors. Nobody behind him. The road remained empty, but the broadcast's clinical description of someone being collected sent ice down his spine. He should have changed the channel, should have turned the CB off entirely, but something compelled him to listen. Over the next 20 minutes, the broadcasts continued at irregular intervals. Sector 3 patrol complete. No violations detected, 10:47 p.m. Reminder, watchers are equipped with thermal imaging. Hiding is not possible. 10:52 p.m. Violation detected in Sector 12. Collection in progress. 10:59 p.m. Each broadcast was delivered in that same calm, almost robotic voice. Kevin tried switching to other CB channels, but they'd all gone dead. Not even static, just empty silence. Only Channel 32 had any sound. His GPS showed him approaching the town of Penfield, maybe 10 miles ahead. He'd stopped there before, knew a good truck stop with decent coffee, civilization, witnesses. Whatever weirdness was happening on the CB, he'd be past it soon. But as his truck crested a hill, he saw something that made no sense. The highway ahead forked, except it shouldn't have. Route 80 was straight through this area. Kevin had driven it dozens of times, but now, clear as day in his headlights, the road split. The right fork continued east with the sign reading Penfield 10 miles. The left fork curved north into darkness with a weathered wooden sign reading Ashford 2 miles. Kevin's brain refused to process it. There was no Ashford. There was no fork in the road. But both were right there in front of him. He slowed the truck, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed to take the right fork, to continue to Penfield, to get away from whatever Ashford was. But that same dark curiosity that made him listen to true crime podcasts, that made him rubberneck at accidents, whispered, "Just look, just see what it is." The CB crackled. "All sectors report ready for final sweep. Curfew begins in 8 minutes. 11:52 p.m. Kevin checked his dashboard clock. 11:52 p.m. The broadcast was happening in real time. Before he could talk himself out of it, Kevin took the left fork. The road into Ashford was older than Route 80, cracked asphalt with grass growing through gaps. His headlights illuminated thick forest on both sides, trees that seemed to lean inward, creating a tunnel effect. The fog grew denser. His high beams barely penetrated 20 feet ahead. 2 miles felt like 20. The forest pressed closer, and Kevin started questioning his decision. This was stupid. He should turn around. But the road was too narrow for his rig. He'd have to find a place to reverse or a spot wide enough to turn around. Then the trees broke and Ashford appeared. It was a small town, maybe 40 or 50 buildings clustered around a main street. Everything looked old, architecture from the 1950s or earlier, brick buildings with faded paint, street lamps that cast weak yellow light. But what struck Kevin immediately was the absolute stillness. No cars, no movement. Every window was dark, and it was exactly midnight. The CB erupted. Curfew is now in effect. All residents must be indoors. Watchers are deployed. Violators will be collected. Kevin rolled slowly down Main Street, his truck's engine obscenely loud in the silence. He saw a post office, a general store, a diner called Martha's, a barber shop, a church. All dark, all motionless, like a movie set between scenes. Then he saw the figures. They stood at irregular intervals along the street, tall, perfectly still, wearing what looked like long, dark coats and wide-brimmed hats. Kevin couldn't make out their faces in the dim light, but something about their proportions was wrong. Too tall, too thin. They didn't move as his truck passed, but Kevin felt certain they were watching. The Watchers. Kevin's breath came short and fast. He needed to turn around, needed to get back to the real highway. He spotted a side street wide enough for his rig and carefully maneuvered, backing up, turning, the entire process taking 3 minutes that felt like hours. The standing figures never moved, but Kevin swore they'd multiplied. There were more of them now, arranged in a loose semicircle around his truck. He completed the turn and accelerated back toward the road he'd come in on. His mirrors showed the Watchers still standing motionless, receding into the fog. The CB. Violation detected. Unauthorized vehicle in Sector 1. Collection authorized. Kevin's stomach dropped. He floored the accelerator as much as he dared on the narrow road. The forest blurred past. His GPS had stopped working entirely, showing only a blank screen. The speedometer climbed, 40, 50, 60 on a road that shouldn't have handled more than 35. Movement in his passenger side mirror. One of the watchers was keeping pace with his truck, gliding through the forest parallel to the road. Not running, gliding. Its coat billowed behind it, and Kevin caught a glimpse of its face. Smooth, featureless like a mannequin. Another appeared on the driver's side, then a third in front, standing in the middle of the road. Kevin had nowhere to go. He couldn't stop, couldn't swerve without jackknifing the trailer. He was going to hit it. At the last second, the figure simply dissolved into fog. Kevin's truck passed through empty air where it had stood. The CB. Vehicle has violated boundary protocols, initiating collection sequence. Kevin's headlights illuminated the fork ahead, the junction with Route 80. Freedom, reality. He pushed the truck harder, the engine screaming. The watchers converged from all sides, dozens of them now flowing from the forest like smoke. They reached toward the truck with elongated arms, their coat sleeves extending impossibly, fingers like branches. Kevin burst through onto Route 80. The watchers vanished as if they'd never existed. His GPS flickered back to life, his phone showed signal, and the CB reverted to normal chatter on Channel 19, two drivers discussing a construction delay near Clearfield. Kevin pulled over at the next rest stop, shaking so badly he could barely shift into park. He sat in the cab for 20 minutes, drinking water, trying to convince himself he'd hallucinated the whole thing. Fatigue, highway hypnosis, carbon monoxide leak. But when he checked his GPS history, it showed a deviation from Route 80, a 2-mile detour into an area labeled simply as unmapped zone. And his dashboard clock had jumped ahead by exactly 37 minutes with no explanation. Kevin got back on the road and finished his delivery. He wrote the whole night off as a bizarre episode, didn't tell anyone, didn't want to sound crazy. But 3 weeks later, he was hauling through the same stretch of Route 80, same time of night around 10:30 p.m. His phone lost signal, his podcast cut out, and his CB, which he'd left on Channel 19, suddenly switched itself to Channel 32. The voice. Residents of Ashford are reminded that curfew begins at midnight. All citizens must be indoors with lights extinguished. The watchers will be patrolling. This is not a drill. This is not a test. Kevin immediately pulled over, turned off the CB, and waited. An hour later, when his phone regained signal, he searched online for any mention of Ashford, Pennsylvania. He found a single reference in a historical archive, a town called Ashford that had been evacuated in 1952 due to unexplained incidents. The town was supposedly demolished, the area returned to state forest. But the broadcasts continued. Kevin started documenting them. Every time he drove Route 80 through that stretch between 10 p.m. and midnight, the CB would pick up the Ashford emergency broadcast system. Always the same messages, always the watchers, always the collections. Other truckers started reporting it too in forums and Facebook groups. Some claimed they'd taken the fork into Ashford and never came back. Others said they'd seen the town but escaped, like Kevin. A few insisted it was all an elaborate hoax, a pirate radio station running a prank. Kevin knows better. He's driven past that fork 17 times now. He's never taken it again, but he sees it every time. The wooden sign, the dark road disappearing into fog. And sometimes, just sometimes, he sees figures standing at the junction, watching the highway, waiting for the next violator to collect. He tells himself he'll take a different route next time. He tells himself he'll switch companies, take routes that avoid Pennsylvania entirely. But something keeps drawing him back to that stretch of road. Some dark curiosity. Some need to understand what Ashford really is, and why it keeps broadcasting its curfew into the void. Kevin's been driving for 12 years. He knows every highway and back road across Pennsylvania. But now he knows there are roads that don't exist on any map. Roads that lead to towns preserved in wrong time, enforcing rules for residents who might not be human anymore, if they ever were. And late at night, when Kevin is alone in his cab between cities, he sometimes turns the CB to Channel 32 just to listen. To hear the watchers report their patrols, to hear the collections, to remind himself that somewhere in the Pennsylvania darkness, Ashford still exists, still enforces its curfew, still waits for the next violation. Kevin tells himself he's just curious. But he started wondering what would happen if he went back. What would happen if he stayed past midnight? What would happen if he let the watchers collect him? There's a darkness in wondering like that. The same darkness that made Ashford necessary in the first place. Whatever that reason was. Story 4. The Miller House Occupancy. Real estate agent Jennifer Santos had been selling homes in rural Pennsylvania for 8 years, and she'd learned to recognize the warning signs of a difficult property. Houses that lingered on the market for years, places with vague histories and nervous sellers, properties priced well below market value with no obvious reason. Why? The Miller House in Shepherd's Glen checked all those boxes and then some. The listing came to Jennifer on a gray Tuesday in March 2023. The property was a 3-bedroom farmhouse on 11 acres built in 1909, listed at $92,000. Absurdly low for the acreage alone, let alone the house. The seller was an estate lawyer named Richard Pemberton, representing the estate of Gerald Miller, who died 6 months prior at age 89. No heirs, no claims. Just an empty house that needed to sell. Jennifer drove out to Shepherd's Glen to do the initial walkthrough. The town was barely a town, maybe 300 people spread across a rural valley surrounded by state forest. The Miller property sat at the end of a dirt road, isolated and forgotten. The house itself was in surprisingly good condition. White clapboard siding, black shutters, a wraparound porch. Needed cosmetic work, but no major structural issues. She met Pemberton at the property. He was a thin man in his 60s, impeccably dressed, carrying a thick folder of documents. His handshake was cold. "Full disclosure, Ms. Santos," he said before they even entered. "This property has a history. Multiple owners over the past 60 years. None have stayed longer than 3 months. I'm legally obligated to inform you of this pattern." Why didn't they stay? They reported various complaints, strange sounds, feelings of being watched, objects moving, the usual claims in cases like this. So it's haunted? Jennifer kept her tone light, professional. Every old house had ghost stories. The previous residents claimed something lived in the house, not a ghost. Something else. Something that doesn't want anyone living there except itself. Pemberton opened the front door. "But legally, I can only disclose reported claims. What you choose to believe is your own business." The interior was dated, floral wallpaper, wood paneling, linoleum floors, but it was clean. Furniture covered with sheets, windows intact. No signs of vandalism or decay. Jennifer walked through room by room, taking notes, photos, already planning the listing description. The only oddity was the second bedroom upstairs. The door was locked, and Pemberton claimed he didn't have the key. "Mr. Miller kept it locked for the last 40 years, said it was storage. We'll need to open it for inspections. I'll have a locksmith come by." Jennifer finished the walkthrough feeling optimistic. Yes, the property had quirks, but nothing unfixable. She listed it that afternoon with photos, details, and a strategically vague mention of rustic charm and historical character. The first showing was with a young couple from Pittsburgh, Mark and Lisa Donnelly, looking for a rural retreat. They fell in love with the property immediately, the price, the acreage, the quiet. Jennifer gave them the required disclosure about previous owners, leaving quickly, framing it as turnover rather than supernatural complaints. People from the city sometimes find rural life harder than expected, she explained. The isolation, the quiet, it's not for everyone. The Donnellys didn't care. They made an offer that same day. The sale went through in 6 weeks. Jennifer pocketed her commission and moved on to other properties. She thought about the Miller house occasionally, wondering how the Donnellys were settling in, but she didn't follow up. No news was good news. 3 months later, she got a call from Mark Donnelly. "We're selling. We need you to list the property immediately." Jennifer's stomach sank. "Is everything all right?" "Just list it, please." She drove out the next day. The Donnellys looked haunted, dark circles under their eyes, jumpiness in their movements. The house looked the same, but the atmosphere felt different, heavier. "What happened?" Jennifer asked gently. Lisa answered, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's something in the house, in that locked bedroom. We opened it when we moved in. It was empty except for a chair in the center of the room facing the window. We moved the chair to another room. It was back the next morning. We threw the chair away. A different chair appeared in the exact same spot. Maybe someone's getting in." "No," Mark interrupted. "It's not that. We started hearing footsteps, always upstairs, always in that room. The door opens and closes by itself. And at night, we hear breathing, not wind, breathing. Like something standing outside our bedroom, listening. We set up cameras," Lisa continued, "and they show nothing. But we feel it, it's always there, and it's getting more aggressive. Last week I found scratches on my arms. I didn't do them. Mark found them on his back. Like something's marking us, claiming us." Jennifer wanted to dismiss it as stress, imagination, the psychological effect of isolation, but she'd seen enough houses to recognize genuine fear. "We can't stay," Mark said. "Whatever's in that house, it doesn't want us there. It's tolerating us, but barely. Every day we feel more unwelcome, more watched. We're terrified it's going to stop tolerating and start doing something worse." Jennifer listed the property again. The Donnellys moved back to Pittsburgh, taking a financial loss but escaping with their sanity. The house sat empty for 2 months before Jennifer brought a retired veteran named Thomas Shaw for a showing. He was unfazed by the disclosure. "I've lived through worse than ghosts," he said. Thomas bought the house. He lasted 5 weeks before calling Jennifer to list it again. "I'm not scared," he told her, "but I'm not stupid either. There's something in that house, and it's made very clear I'm not wanted. I can deal with footsteps and moving furniture, but last night I woke up to something standing at the foot of my bed. Couldn't see it, but I felt it. Felt its presence like pressure on my chest. And I heard a voice, not out loud, but in my head. It said, 'You're the guest. This is my home. Leave.'" Jennifer started dreading the Miller house. She listed it again, sold it to a family from Ohio who lasted 3 weeks, then a couple from Maryland who lasted 10 days, then a single woman from Harrisburg who lasted exactly 1 night before calling Jennifer in hysterics, demanding a refund. "I'm not going back there," she sobbed. "I don't care about the money. I'm never going back." By the 5th resale in a year, Jennifer knew she should drop the listing. But the commissions were good, and part of her wanted to understand what was really happening. She decided to spend a night in the Miller house herself. She told no one, packed a sleeping bag and flashlight, and arrived at dusk on a Friday in October. The house stood silent in the fading light. Jennifer unlocked the door and stepped inside. The atmosphere hit her immediately, a thickness in the air, a sense of wrongness that had nothing to do with temperature or smell. It was the feeling of being in a space that belonged to something else, the feeling of trespassing. Jennifer forced herself to walk through the house, turning on lights, checking rooms. Everything was empty, dusty. The locked bedroom upstairs was open now, and yes, there was a chair, a wooden dining chair facing the window. Jennifer left it where it was. She set up her sleeping bag in the living room downstairs. As darkness fell completely, she heard the first sounds. Footsteps above her, slow, deliberate, walking from one end of the upstairs hallway to the other. Then silence. Then the footsteps again, same pattern. Jennifer's heart raced, but she stayed put. Old houses made sounds, settling, animals in the walls. The footsteps stopped. A door upstairs opened, the unmistakable creak of hinges, then closed, opened, closed, rhythmic, purposeful. Jennifer grabbed her flashlight and forced herself upstairs. The hallway was empty. All doors were closed. She checked each room, finding nothing. The locked bedroom door was closed. She opened it. The chair had moved. It now faced the doorway. Faced her. Jennifer's hands trembled. She walked into the room, telling herself it was a draft, a trick of perception. She grabbed the chair and dragged it downstairs outside and left it on the porch. Back inside, she locked the front door and returned to her sleeping bag. Midnight passed. The house settled into quiet. Jennifer began to relax. Maybe she'd imagined. The front door opened. Jennifer sat up, flashlight on. The door stood wide open. She was certain she'd locked it. She walked over, checked the lock. It was still in the locked position, but the door was open. She closed it, locked it again, and wedged a chair under the handle. She lay back down. Within minutes, she heard dragging sounds. Something heavy being pulled across the porch, down the steps, around the house, then the sound of the back door opening. Jennifer didn't investigate. She lay frozen in her sleeping bag, flashlight gripped in white-knuckled hands. Footsteps entered the house through the back door. Slow, deliberate. They walked through the kitchen, into the hallway. They stopped just outside the living room. Jennifer could see the doorway from where she lay. Nothing was there, but she could feel it, a presence, massive and cold, standing just beyond her line of sight, watching her. The voice spoke, not out loud, but directly into her mind. "This is my home. You are the guest. I allow you to be here. Others stayed too long. They tried to claim my home. I had to make them leave. But you understand, don't you? You're not trying to stay, you're just visiting." Jennifer's voice came out as a whisper. "Who are you?" "I've been here since before the house. I was here when the trees were cut, when the foundation was laid, when the walls went up. They built it on my ground over my place, but I didn't mind. I went inside. I've been inside ever since. This is my home now. The house is my body. I live in the walls, in the floor, in the air, and I don't share. What happened to the people who stayed? They became part of the house, like I am. We're together in the walls, in the wood, in the foundation. They tried to force me out. So I pulled them in. Do you want to see them?" "No." "Good. You're smarter than they were. You can leave, but tell the others, this house is occupied. It will always be occupied. Anyone who tries to live here will join us eventually. The house feeds on occupation. It needs people to claim it, to try to make it theirs. And then it takes them. I take them." The presence withdrew. The footsteps receded through the house back toward the kitchen. The back door closed softly. Jennifer didn't wait until morning. She grabbed her things and left immediately, speeding down the dirt road without looking back. She dropped the listing the next day, told Pemberton she couldn't represent the property anymore. He didn't argue, said he'd find another agent. But Jennifer kept tabs on the Miller house. In the 2 years since her night there, it's been sold 6 more times. Each owner lasts days or weeks before fleeing, and according to county records, 3 owners have simply vanished, moved in, stopped responding to calls, disappeared completely. Their belongings remain in the house, but the people are gone. Jennifer thinks about them sometimes, wonders if they're in the walls now, part of the structure, absorbed into whatever lives there. She thinks about the voice, the certainty in its statement. The house feeds on occupation. She's since learned that the Miller house was built on the site of a much older dwelling, a cabin from the 1700s where something terrible happened. Records are vague, but they mention a family that disappeared and locals who refused to go near the property, claiming the ground was claimed by something old. Whatever it is, it's still there, still allowing temporary guests but never permanent residents, still pulling people into the walls when they try to stay too long. The Miller house is currently listed with an agent from Philadelphia who doesn't know its history. Jennifer saw the listing online last week. It's priced at $68,000 now. The photos show the interior clean and empty, except in the second bedroom upstairs where a chair sits in the center of the room, facing the window. Always facing the window, waiting for the next occupant. Story 5. The Shepherd's Glen Routine. Daniel Mercer moved to Shepherd's Glen, Pennsylvania in August 2022, seeking exactly what the town promised: routine, predictability, and peace. At 53, after a chaotic divorce and a nervous breakdown that cost him his job as an investment banker in New York, Daniel needed structure. His therapist had recommended small-town life, somewhere quiet where he could rebuild himself through simple, consistent patterns. Shepherd's Glen was perfect. Population 412, nestled in a valley surrounded by farmland. One main street with essential businesses: a grocery store, a diner, a post office, a library, a hardware store. No chain restaurants, no traffic lights, no surprises. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where days followed predictable rhythms. Daniel rented a small house on Elm Street and immediately established his routine. Wake at 6:30 a.m., coffee on the porch, walk to Main Street at 7:15 a.m. Breakfast at Helen's Diner, same booth, same order, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, orange juice. Morning at the library from 8:30 to 11 Swan, reading in the armchair by the window. Lunch at home, afternoon walk along the nature trail. Dinner at the diner again at 6 p.m. Meatloaf on Mondays, chicken parmesan on Tuesdays, salmon on Wednesdays, and so on. Home by 7 p.m. Read until 9 p.m. Sleep by 10 p.m. Every day, no variation, no spontaneity. The routine was therapeutic. Within weeks, Daniel felt better than he had in years. The structure quieted his anxiety. The predictability soothed his frayed nerves. The townspeople welcomed him warmly. Helen at the diner knew his order before he sat down. Margaret at the library set aside the books she thought he'd enjoy. Frank at the hardware store greeted him by name during his Saturday morning visits. Everyone in Shepherd's Glen followed routines, Daniel noticed. The same people in the same places at the same times. Like clockwork. Like a town operating in perfect synchronization. It was exactly what Daniel needed. The first sign that something was wrong came in late October after Daniel had been living in Shepherd's Glen for 2 months. He deviated from his routine for the first time, staying up past 10 p.m. to finish a particularly engrossing novel. He finally turned off his light at 11:47 p.m. The next morning, when Daniel walked to the diner for breakfast, Helen greeted him at the door with a concerned expression. "Daniel, we were worried about you yesterday. You didn't come in for dinner." Daniel frowned. "I was here. Tuesday night, 6 p.m., chicken parmesan." Helen's concern deepened. "Today's Tuesday, Daniel. Yesterday was Monday. You missed your Monday dinner, meatloaf." "You're always here for meatloaf." Daniel's mind stuttered. He'd lost a day? That wasn't possible. He'd lived Monday. He remembered it. Library in the morning, afternoon walk, dinner at the diner. But Helen was insisting it hadn't happened. "I think you're mistaken." Daniel said carefully. I was here last night. No, dear, you weren't. Several of us were concerned. Frank drove by your house around 6:30 to check on you, but your lights were off. We thought you might be ill. Daniel felt reality slip sideways. He pulled out his phone to check the date. Tuesday, October 25th. He scrolled through his calendar. Monday, October 24th showed no entries, no notes, like the day had simply vanished from his life. I must have mixed up the days, Daniel said weakly. I'm sorry for worrying everyone. Helen patted his hand. The routine is important, Daniel. Don't break it. Things get confused when you break it. That phrasing bothered him. Things get confused, not you get confused. Things. Daniel ordered his breakfast, scrambled eggs, wheat toast, orange juice, and tried to convince himself he'd simply had a strange mental lapse. Stress. Residual effects from his breakdown, nothing to worry about. But he hadn't felt stressed. He'd felt fine. Over the next 2 weeks, Daniel adhered strictly to his routine. Every day flowed perfectly into the next. Wake at 6:30, coffee, walk, breakfast, library, lunch, walk, dinner, read, sleep, no variations, no mistakes. Until November 8th, when Daniel accidentally slept through his alarm. He woke at 8:15 a.m., startled and disoriented. He'd missed his morning walk, would be late to the library. His routine was broken. He rushed through his morning, skipping coffee, hurrying to the diner. When he arrived at 8:30, Helen wasn't there. The diner was open, but a woman Daniel had never seen before stood behind the counter, younger, unfamiliar. Where's Helen? Daniel asked. The woman looked at him blankly. Who's Helen? I'm Tracy. I've been running this diner for 3 years. Daniel's heart hammered. No, Helen. She's been here for decades. I see her every morning. I don't know who you're talking about, sir. Are you feeling all right? Daniel backed out of the diner and walked to the library. Margaret wasn't at the desk. A teenage girl he didn't recognize was checking out books. The armchair by the window, his armchair, was occupied by an old man Daniel had never seen. Panic rising, Daniel walked through town. Everything looked the same, but the people were different. Wrong. He didn't recognize anyone, and no one recognized him. When he tried asking about Helen, about Margaret, about Frank, people looked at him like he was insane. By noon, Daniel was convinced he was having a psychotic episode. He went home, locked the doors, and tried to calm himself. This wasn't real. It couldn't be real. His phone rang. An unknown number. Daniel answered. Hello? Helen's voice. Daniel, you broke the routine. You have to fix it. Helen, where are you? What's happening? The routine keeps us here, keeps the town stable. When you break it, things shift. You shift. You're in a different Shepherd's Glen now, a wrong one. You need to come back. How? Return to the routine. Exactly. Do everything you were supposed to do this morning, the coffee, the walk, the breakfast, every detail. If you do it correctly, you'll shift back. This is insane. Is it? Or have you noticed how perfect the routine felt, how therapeutic? Shepherd's Glen rewards routine, Daniel. The town thrives on it. But the town punishes deviation. You need to come back before you're stuck there permanently. The call ended. Daniel sat in his house, mind racing. This couldn't be real. But the alternative, that he was having a complete break from reality, wasn't better. He decided to try Helen's advice. At 6:30 p.m., the time he should have woken up if he'd started his day correctly, Daniel began again. He made coffee. He sat on the porch and drank it exactly as he always did. Then he walked to Main Street, following his exact route. He entered the diner at 7:30 p.m., even though it was the wrong time for breakfast. Tracy was still behind the counter, looking at him oddly. Daniel ordered scrambled eggs, wheat toast, orange juice. She served it. He ate it. And as he ate, the diner began to change. Subtle shifts. The wallpaper pattern altered slightly. The vintage Coca-Cola sign on the wall changed position. The napkin dispenser on his table switched from metal to plastic and back to metal. When he looked up from his plate, Helen stood behind the counter, exactly where she should be. "Welcome back," she said with a gentle smile. Daniel's hands shook. "What is this place?" Shepherd's Glen exists on routine. The town was founded by people seeking order, seeking escape from chaos. Over time, that desire became something more, something binding. The town itself came alive through our collective need for structure. Now it requires it. The routines keep the town stable, keep us in the right version of Shepherd's Glen. Break the routine and you slip between versions. Different timelines, different realities, different configurations of the town. Most people can't get back. They're trapped in the wrong Shepherd's Glen where they don't belong, where no one knows them. That's impossible. You've seen it now. You've felt it. The routine isn't just comforting, Daniel, it's binding. Those of us who've lived here longest understand. We maintain our routines perfectly because deviation has consequences. What happens to people who can't find their way back? Helen's expression saddened. They fade. The wrong Shepherd's Glen rejects them. They become ghosts, stuck between versions not fully real in any of them. We've lost dozens over the years. People who moved here seeking structure but couldn't maintain it perfectly. Daniel wanted to run, to pack his things and leave immediately. But Helen shook her head as if reading his thoughts. If you leave now, while you're displaced, you'll take the wrongness with you. You'll never quite fit anywhere again. You need to stay. Follow the routine perfectly for 1 full month. That will stabilize you. Then if you still want to leave, you can. And if I don't follow the routine, you'll slip again, further each time until you're lost completely. Daniel had no choice. He stayed. For the next month, he followed his routine with obsessive precision. Wake at 6:30, not 6:29 or 6:31. Coffee poured to the exact level in his mug. Walk to Main Street in exactly 14 minutes. Same route, same pace. Breakfast at 7:15. Library at 8:30. Every detail perfect every day. The town rewarded his obedience. Life felt smooth, effortless, no anxiety, no stress, just the comfortable rhythm of days that blended into each other like beads on a string. But Daniel started noticing other things. The same conversation at the diner, repeated word for word every Tuesday. The same dog walker passing his house at exactly 3:17 p.m. every afternoon. The same 3 cars driving down Main Street in the same order every evening. Shepherd's Glen wasn't just running on routine. It was looping, the same patterns over and over with minor variations. And the people. Daniel realized they were stuck too. Helen had been running the diner for 40 years, but she didn't look older than 50. Frank at the hardware store claimed he'd been in business for 30 years, but the store's calendar was stuck on June 1997. Margaret at the library never aged, never changed her hairstyle, never read a different book. They were all trapped in their routines, living the same patterns endlessly. And those patterns had become the only thing keeping them real. Daniel completed his month, stabilized, but he didn't leave. Where would he go? His old life was destroyed. And if he was honest, the routine had become too comfortable, too necessary. His anxiety was gone. His depression had lifted. He felt better in Shepherd's Glen than he'd felt anywhere. So he stayed. It's been 2.5 years now. Daniel still follows his routine perfectly. Wake at 6:30, coffee, walk, breakfast, library, lunch, walk, dinner, read, sleep every day. No deviation, no surprises. He's noticed he doesn't age anymore. His hair hasn't grown. His beard maintains the same length. He wears the same clothes he wore when he arrived, and they never wear out. Sometimes new people move to Shepherd's Glen seeking the same peace Daniel sought. He watches them establish their routines. Some master it, some slip, disappear into wrong versions of the town, are never seen again. Daniel doesn't warn them. It would be breaking his routine to have conversations that aren't part of his pattern. Sometimes, late at night when he's supposed to be sleeping, Daniel lies awake and wonders if he's alive or if he's already faded, already become a ghost of routine, repeating the same actions in an endless loop because that's all he is anymore. A pattern without a person. But then morning comes. 6:30 a.m., coffee on the porch, walk to Main Street, breakfast at Helen's Diner. And the routine soothes him, comforts him, reminds him that in Shepherd's Glen the pattern is what matters, not the person following it. Just the routine itself, eternal and perfect and endlessly the same. Story 6. The Last Church of Redemption Hollow. Father Michael Reese arrived in Redemption Hollow, Pennsylvania on the third Sunday of April 2021. The diocese had assigned him to St. Joseph's Church, a small parish in a town so rural it barely appeared on maps. At 62, Father Michael had served in the priesthood for 34 years, ministering in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and various suburban parishes. This assignment felt like semi-retirement, a quiet place to spend his final years before stepping down. Redemption Hollow was aptly named, a valley community of maybe 600 souls, surrounded by forested hills. The town had a main street with essential businesses, a small school, and 3 churches: St. Joseph's Catholic Church, First Baptist, and Redemption Hollow Methodist. The religious makeup of the town was surprisingly balanced, with roughly equal numbers attending each congregation. Father Michael found St. Joseph's well-maintained despite its age. Built in 1893, the white wooden church had a modest bell tower, stained glass windows depicting traditional saints, and wooden pews that seated about 100 people. The attached rectory was comfortable if dated. The previous priest, Father Thomas Byrne, had retired at 84 after serving Redemption Hollow for 42 years. The congregation welcomed Father Michael warmly. His first Mass drew nearly 70 attendees, better than he'd expected for a dying rural town. The parishioners were kind, bringing him casseroles and baked goods, offering help with maintenance, inviting him to community events. Everything seemed normal, pleasant even. The first indication of strangeness came during his second week, when Father Michael met the other clergy in town. Pastor David Walsh from First Baptist and Reverend Ellen Morrison from the Methodist Church invited him to lunch at the local diner, a traditional welcome for new religious leadership. Both were friendly, professional, and oddly eager to discuss theology. Not interfaith dialogue in the usual sense, but specific questions about sin, redemption, forgiveness, and damnation. Pastor Walsh, a man in his 40s with an intense gaze, asked Father Michael about unforgivable sins. The Catholic Church teaches all sins can be forgiven through genuine repentance and confession, correct? Walsh said. Generally, yes, with proper contrition and sacramental confession. But what about collective sin, community sin? If an entire town committed an act of evil, could that be forgiven? Father Michael frowned. That's a complex theological question. Why do you ask? Reverend Morrison intervened smoothly. David's just being dramatic, don't mind him. But welcome to Redemption Hollow, Father. I hope you'll find peace here. The conversation moved to other topics, but Father Michael couldn't shake the strange intensity of Walsh's question. Over the following weeks, Father Michael settled into his role. Mass every Sunday and Wednesday evening, confession on Saturdays, pastoral visits to sick parishioners, maintenance of the church grounds, the rhythms of parish life. But he noticed peculiarities. First, despite the town's name, Redemption Hollow, no one seemed to know its origin. When Father Michael asked longtime residents why the town had been named that, he received vague answers. Always been called that. Some old story, I guess. No one had specifics. Second, the town had an unusually high church attendance rate. Nearly everyone attended one of the three churches regularly. Father Michael had never seen such consistent religious participation outside of fundamentalist communities. And unlike those communities, Redemption Hollow residents weren't particularly evangelical. They simply attended every week without fail. Third, the three churches held services at staggered times on Sundays: St. Joseph's at 8 a.m., First Baptist at 10 a.m., Methodist at noon, and many townspeople attended more than one service. Father Michael started recognizing faces from his morning mass showing up at Pastor Walsh's service afterward. When he mentioned this to his parishioners, they smiled uncomfortably and changed the subject. The truth revealed itself on a humid night in late June. Father Michael woke at 2:37 a.m. to the sound of bells, not his church bells, but all three churches' bells ringing simultaneously. He got dressed and walked toward St. Joseph's, confused and concerned. Who was ringing the bells at this hour? As he approached the church, he saw the entire town moving through the darkness, people walking from their homes, converging on the three churches in silence. No one spoke. No one acknowledged Father Michael. They simply walked with purpose, entering the churches in steady streams. Father Michael followed his parishioners into St. Joseph's. The church was packed, every pew filled, people standing along the walls. The lights were on, candles lit. Pastor Walsh and Reverend Morrison stood at the altar alongside him, which made no sense. This was a Catholic church. The congregation turned to face the three clergy members, and Thomas Brennan, the town's mayor, stepped forward from the front pew. "Father Reese," Mayor Brennan said, "we're sorry you have to learn this way. We'd hoped to ease you into understanding as we did with Father Byron. But the time has come again and you need to witness." Witness what? The town's purpose, the reason Redemption Hollow exists. The side door of the church opened and four townsmen entered, dragging a fifth person, a man in his 30s, terrified, gagged, hands bound. Father Michael recognized him vaguely. He'd seen the man around town but didn't know his name. "What is this?" Father Michael's voice rose. "What are you doing?" "This is Marcus Lyle," Mayor Brennan explained calmly. 3 weeks ago, Marcus killed his girlfriend, Rachel Simmons, strangled her in a fit of rage, and hid her body in the woods. The state police haven't found her yet. Marcus thought he'd gotten away with it. But we know. We always know. Marcus struggled against his bonds, making muffled sounds through the gag. "You can't take the law into your own hands," Father Michael said, backing toward the door. "This is murder. I'm calling the police." "We are the police," Chief Dan Mercer said from the crowd. "We're the law, the justice, and the redemption." Pastor Walsh stepped forward. "Father Reese, Redemption Hollow was founded in 1847 by a group of people who believed the law was insufficient. They believed that true justice required both punishment and redemption. This town exists as a place of cleansing. When someone commits an irredeemable sin, murder, rape, abuse of the innocent, they're brought before the congregation for judgment. This is insane. You can't just... We don't punish them," Reverend Morrison interrupted. "We redeem them. Through their death, we absorb their sin. The community takes on their guilt and we cleanse it through collective prayer, through ritual, through the churches. We've done this for 174 years. The town thrives because of it. No one here dies of cancer. Disease rarely touches us. We live longer, healthier lives. The trade is simple. We perform the redemption and the town prospers." Father Michael looked at the packed church, at the faces of people he'd come to know. They weren't cruel, they weren't monsters. They looked like ordinary people performing an ordinary ritual. "How many?" he whispered. 17 or 18 per year, Mayor Brennan said. "Murderers, rapists, those who harm children. We find them in neighboring towns, lure them here, judge them, and redeem them. Their deaths aren't meaningless. Through our ritual, their sins are forgiven, their souls cleansed, and the town receives its blessing. You're serial killers, all of you. We're shepherds, Pastor Walsh said. We remove evil from the world and transform it into grace. That's what redemption means. The congregation began to chant, a low, rhythmic sound in a language Father Michael didn't recognize. Marcus Lyle's eyes went wide with terror as the four men dragged him toward the altar. Father Michael ran. He burst out of the church and sprinted toward his car, planning to drive to the nearest town with real police, real law, real sanity. But his car wouldn't start, and when he tried to leave on foot, he found himself walking in circles, always ending up back at St. Joseph's. Reverend Morrison found him sitting on the church steps at dawn, defeated. "You can't leave," she said gently. "Once you know, you're part of it. The town won't let you go." What happened to Marcus? He was redeemed. His sin is ours now. And through our prayer, it's been cleansed. His soul is at peace. You murdered him. We saved him. And we saved everyone he would have hurt in the future. The math is simple, Father. One evil person dies and dozens of potential victims live. The town thrives. Everyone prospers. Isn't that worth it? Father Michael wanted to say no, wanted to cling to his moral certainty. But looking at Redemption Hollow in the morning light, children playing, people waving to neighbors, gardens blooming, everything peaceful and good, he couldn't find the words. He's been in Redemption Hollow for 3 years now. He performs Mass every Sunday and Wednesday. He hears confession, though no one confesses the redemptions. He stands at the altar alongside Pastor Walsh and Reverend Morrison 17 or 18 times per year, watching as the town brings the guilty forward, judges them, and cleanses their sins through ritual death. Father Michael tells himself he's a prisoner, that he'd leave if he could. But the truth, which he can barely admit even to himself, is that he stopped trying to leave. Because Redemption Hollow is peaceful. The crime rate is 0. No one suffers from major illness. Children are safe. The elderly live vibrantly into their 90s. It's a paradise built on a foundation of judged blood. And after 3 years of watching, of participating in the rituals, of seeing the faces of the murderers and rapists brought forward, Father Michael has started to wonder if Redemption Hollow is right. If maybe true redemption requires sacrifice. If maybe the sin they cleanse is worth the method. That's the thought that terrifies him most. Not that he's trapped, but that he's convinced. That he's become what Redemption Hollow makes of everyone who stays too long. A believer in necessary evil. A shepherd who culls the flock to save it. Last month, Father Michael stood at the altar during a redemption. The congregation chanted, the guilty person was brought forward, and for the first time Father Michael joined the chant. His voice blended with 600 others, ancient words in an ancient language, transforming murder into mercy. And when it was done, when the person's body was carried away to be buried in the Hollow's secret cemetery, Father Michael felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. Redemption Hollow had redeemed him too, made him complicit, made him whole. And that, more than the murders, more than the rituals, more than anything else, is the true horror of Redemption Hollow. Not what they do to the guilty, but what they do to everyone else, turning good people into executioners. One redemption at a time. Story 7, The Forgetting Fog of Millbrook. Emma Castellano moved to Millbrook, Pennsylvania in September 2023 after accepting a position as a high school English teacher. At 28, she was eager for a fresh start after a difficult breakup and 5 years teaching in overcrowded Philadelphia schools. Millbrook seemed ideal, a picturesque town of roughly 900 residents, surrounded by rolling hills and farmland with a small but well-funded school system. The superintendent, Dr. Patricia Hammond, had been enthusiastic during Emma's interview, and the salary was surprisingly competitive. The town itself was charming. Victorian houses lined tree-canopied streets. A main street featured local businesses, a bookstore, a cafe, a family-owned grocery, a hardware store. Everyone Emma met was friendly and welcoming. The school, Millbrook High, served about 200 students from the town and surrounding rural areas. Emma's first week teaching went smoothly. Her students were attentive and well-behaved, perhaps even unusually so. No phones out during class, no talking back, no disruptions. Coming from Philadelphia, where classroom management consumed half her energy, the difference was startling. But Emma noticed something odd. When she asked students about their lives outside school, their hobbies, their plans, their dreams, they gave vague, generic answers. I like sports. I'm thinking about college. I enjoy spending time with family. Nothing specific, no details, no personality. She mentioned it to another teacher, Robert Chen, who taught history and had been at Millbrook High for 5 years. They're good kids, Robert said. Maybe a little sheltered, but good. Don't they seem blank to you? Robert's expression flickered with something Emma couldn't identify. You'll get used to Millbrook. It's different here. That phrase, it's different here, Emma heard repeatedly over the first month. When she asked about town history, about why Millbrook thrived while other rural Pennsylvania towns died, about why housing prices were so low despite the town's appeal, people smiled and said, "It's different here." The strangeness intensified in early October. Emma assigned her junior English class a personal narrative essay. Write about a significant memory from your childhood, a moment that shaped who you are. Simple assignment, standard curriculum. When she collected the essays, every single one was nearly identical in tone and content. Generic memories of birthday parties, family dinners, first days of school. No conflict, no emotion, no real detail. They read like templates, like someone had given the students a formula and they'd all followed it exactly. Emma called one student aside, Jessica Monroe, a quiet girl who'd shown flashes of insight during class discussions. "Jessica, your essay is very nice, but I was hoping for something more personal. A specific memory that really mattered to you." Jessica's face went blank. "I don't understand. Tell me about something you remember strongly. Something that made you happy or sad or scared. Something real." Jessica's eyes unfocused. I don't remember things like that. Everyone remembers things that affected them emotionally. I remember school. I remember my house. I remember my parents, but it's all the same. I can't remember anything specific. Emma felt a chill. You can't remember specific events from your childhood? No. Can you? The question hung in the air. Emma could remember her childhood vividly. Breaking her arm at age 7, her first kiss at 14, her grandfather's funeral when she was 12. Specific, detailed memories. Jessica was staring at her with genuine confusion, as if Emma's ability to remember was strange. Emma dismissed the student and went to the teacher's lounge. She found Robert grading papers. "Rob, can I ask you something? Do you remember your childhood clearly? Specific memories? Specific events?" Robert set down his pen. "Why are you asking?" "My students don't seem to have detailed memories. They remember generalities but nothing specific." Robert's expression hardened. "Emma, drop it." "Drop what?" "You're new. You don't understand Millbrook yet. Just teach your curriculum and don't ask questions about memories." "What the hell does that mean?" Robert looked around the empty lounge, then lowered his voice. "I'm going to tell you something, and then we're never going to discuss it again. Millbrook is different because people here don't hold on to painful memories. The town takes them, removes them. It's been happening for as long as anyone can remember. Kids growing up here don't retain detailed memories. Neither do adults who stay long enough. You'll start forgetting too eventually. Your past will blur. You'll remember the general shape of your life, but not the specifics. Emma laughed nervously. That's ridiculous. You're saying the town erases memories? I'm saying something in Millbrook makes people forget. Some kind of environmental effect. Maybe something in the water, maybe something else. No one knows. But people who live here lose their memories over time. It starts slowly, forgetting small details, then bigger things. Eventually, you won't remember your childhood, your past relationships, your trauma. You'll just remember the present and the recent past. Everything else becomes fog. That's impossible. Is it? How much do you remember from your first day here? From moving into your apartment? Can you recall those days clearly? Emma tried. She remembered arriving in Millbrook, remembered unpacking, remembered her first day teaching. But the details were blurry. She couldn't remember what she'd worn, what she'd eaten, what specific things people had said. It had only been 6 weeks, but those memories felt distant, indistinct. That's just normal forgetting, she said weakly. Try to remember something from your childhood, something specific, really try. Emma closed her eyes and thought of her 7th birthday. She'd broken her arm falling off a swing. She could picture the hospital, her mother's worried face, the blue cast. But as she focused on the memory, it seemed to slip away like she was trying to hold water. The details grew vague. Had it been her 7th birthday? Or 8th? Had she broken her arm or just sprained it? I can't remember clearly. That's the forgetting. It's already starting. You've been here long enough that Millbrook is affecting you. Emma's hands trembled. Why? Why would a town make people forget? Some people think it's intentional, that Millbrook was founded by people running from their pasts, and they found or created something that would let them forget. Let them start over without the weight of memory. Others think it's natural, some kind of geological or atmospheric phenomenon. But the effect is the same. Stay in Millbrook long enough, and your past disappears. You become a person of the present, nothing more. Why don't people leave? Because it's peaceful. No traumatic memories means no PTSD, no depression from past abuse, no grief that lingers for years. People here are happy in a way most people never achieve. They're not haunted by regrets or losses, they just exist in the now. And for a lot of people, that's worth the cost. Emma stood abruptly. I'm leaving. You won't. The forgetting is already in you. The idea of leaving will fade. You'll decide to stay just a little longer and then longer still until you forget you ever wanted to leave. Emma grabbed her purse and walked out of the school. She got in her car and drove toward the town limits, planning to pack her apartment and leave immediately. But as she drove, her resolve wavered. Why was she leaving? Because Robert had told her a crazy story? Because her students had trouble with an essay? Those weren't reasons to abandon a good job, a pleasant town, a comfortable life. By the time she reached her apartment, Emma had decided to stay at least until the end of the school year. No point in leaving mid-semester. That would be irresponsible. That was 14 months ago. Emma still teaches at Millbrook High. She still assigns essays and grades papers and manages her classroom. She's vaguely aware that she came from somewhere else, that she had a life before Millbrook, but she can't quite remember the details. Philadelphia? Was that where she taught before? Or was it Pittsburgh? The memories are fog, insubstantial. She knows she had a relationship that ended badly. She can't remember the person's name or what they looked like. She knows her parents live somewhere, but when she tries to picture their faces, there's only blur. She knows she has a college degree, but she can't remember her university or her friends there. The present is clear. The past is fog. And most of the time, Emma doesn't mind. There's a relief in not remembering pain. She used to lie awake at night replaying her breakup, analyzing what went wrong. Now she doesn't remember enough to replay anything. She used to feel guilty about an argument she'd had with her mother years ago. Now the argument is gone, and with it the guilt. Millbrook makes people lighter, unburdened, free from the weight of accumulated memory and regret. But sometimes late at night, Emma feels something missing, a sense that she used to be more complete, that memories are what made her who she was, and without them she's less real, less solid, like she's fading into the same generic blankness she sees in her students. She's tried to hold on to specific memories, writing them down in a journal. But when she reads her own entries, they feel like stories about someone else. The emotional connection is gone. The person who wrote those entries isn't her anymore. Robert was right. She's become a person of the present, nothing more. Last week, a new teacher arrived, a young woman named Casey something. Emma already can't quite remember her last name. Casey asked Emma about her life before Millbrook, and Emma couldn't answer. The details were fog. Casey looked disturbed. "You don't remember where you're from?" Emma smiled. "It doesn't matter. I'm here now." That's what everyone in Millbrook says eventually. It doesn't matter, I'm here now. Because Millbrook doesn't just erase painful memories, it erases all memories. Everything that made you who you were dissolves into fog, and you become a person without history, without context, without a past, just an eternal present in a pleasant town where nothing changes because no one remembers that change used to happen. Emma sees Casey sometimes walking through town with a confused expression, trying to hold on to something that's already slipping away. Emma wants to warn her, wants to tell her to run before the forgetting becomes total. But she can't quite remember why it matters. Can't quite remember what memories are for. The fog is complete now, and in the fog, Emma has found peace. Not happiness exactly, but an absence of pain that feels close enough. That's what Millbrook offers, that's what it takes, and Emma, like everyone else in town, has accepted the trade. Forgotten she had a choice. Forgotten she used to be someone different. Forgotten everything except this moment, this day, this foggy present that stretches forward without end. Millbrook is different here. Different because no one remembers what different means. Story 8. The Prosperity of Coaldale. Dr. Marcus Webb arrived in Coaldale, Pennsylvania in June 2020 to conduct research on economic resilience in rural communities. As an economist specializing in post-industrial town revitalization, Marcus had studied dozens of declining coal and steel towns across Pennsylvania, Ohio, and West Virginia. Coaldale was an anomaly, a former coal mining town that should have died decades ago but somehow thrived. While neighboring towns withered into poverty, addiction epidemics, and population decline, Coaldale maintained a stable population of roughly 1,000, boasted near zero unemployment, featured updated infrastructure, and reported a median income that rivaled suburban communities. Every business on Main Street was occupied and profitable. The schools were well funded. Crime was virtually non-existent. On paper, Coaldale was an economic miracle. Marcus had secured a 6-month grant to study the town's success and document best practices that could be replicated elsewhere. He rented a small house on Birch Street and immediately began interviews with residents, business owners, and town officials. Everyone he spoke to was friendly and willing to talk. They credited the town's success to community investment, cooperation, and making the right choices. But when Marcus pressed for specific, what policies, what programs, what exact decisions, people became vague. "We just take care of each other," Mayor Donald Pritchard said during their first interview. Always have. But how specifically? What economic mechanisms allowed Coaldale to avoid the decline that affected every similar town? Good planning, smart leadership. Marcus tried different angles. He examined tax records, business registrations, employment data. Everything looked legitimate, even mundane. Standard small-town economics. Nothing that should have produced Coaldale's prosperity. The first odd detail emerged when Marcus noticed that every business in town had opened or changed ownership in 1989. The hardware store, the grocery, the pharmacy, the 3 restaurants, the gas station, all established or transferred in that single year. Before 1989, records were spotty or missing. Marcus asked Mayor Pritchard about it. Was there some kind of economic development initiative in 1989? A revitalization program? The mayor's smile tightened. That's when we made our commitment, when Coaldale became what it is today. Commitment to what? To prosperity, to survival, to doing what was necessary. That phrase, doing what was necessary, Marcus heard it from multiple residents, always with the same tone, the same slight discomfort, like they were referring to something specific that everyone understood but no one wanted to say aloud. Marcus dug into historical records at the county archives. He found that Coaldale had been founded in 1892 as a coal mining town. It grew rapidly, peaking at nearly 5,000 residents in the 1920s. The mines began playing out in the 1950s. By 1980, the population had dropped below 800, poverty was endemic, and the town was dying. Then something changed in 1989. Population stabilized at 1,000. New businesses opened, income levels rose, and they'd stayed that way for over 30 years, defying every economic trend. What happened in 1989? Marcus searched newspaper archives from that year. The Coaldale Weekly Gazette had run consistently since 1894, but the entire year of 1989 was missing from the archives. Not damaged, not lost, simply never saved or deliberately removed. He asked the librarian Helen Morse about the missing year. She looked uncomfortable. Some records get lost over time. An entire year? That's unusual. I suppose it is. Do you remember 1989? You would have been working here then. Helen's face went pale. I don't like to talk about that year. Why not? Because it's private. It's Coaldale's business, not yours. You're here to study our success, Dr. Webb. Just focus on that. Marcus became obsessed. He interviewed older residents, people who would have been adults in 1989. Most refused to discuss that year. A few hinted at difficult decisions or necessary sacrifices, but wouldn't elaborate. One elderly woman, Martha Kerrigan, finally gave him something concrete. You want to know why Coaldale survived? Martha said. She was 86, living alone in a small house on the edge of town. Because we made a deal, all of us, the whole town. What kind of deal? The kind you don't break. The kind that keeps you alive but costs you pieces of your soul. Mrs. Kerrigan, I need you to be specific. She was silent for a long moment then. In the winter of 1988, Coaldale was dying. The last mine had closed. Young people were leaving. Those of us who stayed were too poor or too old to go anywhere else. We were starving, Dr. Webb, literally starving. And then something came to town. Something that offered us a choice. Something? What do you mean? I don't know what it was. It looked like a man, but it wasn't. It showed up at a town meeting in January 1989. Walked right in and made us an offer. It would give Coaldale prosperity. Stable population, good jobs, comfortable lives, everything we needed. But in exchange, we had to give it something every year. A tithe, it called it. Marcus's skin crawled. A tithe of what? Martha's eyes filled with tears. One person every year on the anniversary of the deal, January 15th. The town has to choose someone who's broken our laws or violated our trust, someone who's hurt others or refuses to contribute, and we give that person to it. Give them? You mean kill them? We don't kill anyone. We bring them to the old mine entrance up on Ash Hill at midnight on January 15th, and it comes. It takes them into the mine. We never see them again. Marcus sat back, stunned. You're telling me Coaldale murders someone every year? Not murder, sacrifice. There's a difference. Murder is meaningless. Sacrifice has purpose. We choose carefully. Child abusers, thieves who won't reform. People who bring drugs into town, people who hurt others. Every person we've given has been someone who deserved punishment anyway. No one deserves that. And you're asking me to believe some supernatural entity made a deal with your town? Martha shrugged. Believe what you want, but check the population records. Exactly one person disappears from Coaldale every January. Sometimes it's ruled a suicide, sometimes a disappearance, but it always happens, and every year the town prospers a little more. Businesses do well. No one goes hungry, no one gets seriously ill. It's the exchange. Marcus left Martha's house, mind reeling. He wanted to dismiss it as the delusions of an elderly woman. But he checked the records. She was right. Every single January since 1989, one person had died or vanished from Coaldale. Suicides, accidents, disappearances, always one. Always in January. He brought his findings to Mayor Pritchard, expecting denials. Instead, the mayor sighed. Mrs. Kerrigan talked. I was afraid someone would eventually. Pritchard gestured to a chair. Sit, Dr. Webb, let me be honest with you. Is it true? You sacrifice people? We fulfill our agreement. Yes. Once per year, we deliver someone to the old mine, and in return, Coaldale thrives. You've seen it yourself. We have what every other town like us has lost. The deal works. It's mass murder. Conspiracy to commit murder. I'm reporting this to the state police. You can try, but you won't find evidence. The people we give are chosen carefully. Individuals with no close family, people who won't be missed, or people whose disappearances can be explained naturally, and the entity we deal with leaves no traces, no bodies, no forensic evidence, just absence. I'll tell everyone, I'll publish my findings, I'll expose Coaldale. Mayor Pritchard smiled sadly. You're a smart man, Dr. Webb. Who's going to believe you? You're going to claim a Pennsylvania town made a deal with a supernatural entity and sacrifices people annually? You'll sound insane. Your academic career will end, and Coaldale will continue exactly as it has for 30+ years. Marcus stood backing toward the door. I'm leaving. Tonight. That's your choice, but consider something. You're unmarried. No children. Your parents are dead. You have colleagues, but no close friends. You're socially isolated. You came to Coaldale alone. If you were to disappear, who would really notice? The threat was clear. Marcus ran to his rental house, threw his belongings into his car, and drove toward the edge of town. But his car died on the outskirts, engine seizing for no reason. He tried calling 911, but his phone had no signal. He started walking, but the roads seemed to loop back on themselves, always depositing him back in Coaldale. By dawn, exhausted and terrified, he found himself sitting on the steps of his rental house. Mayor Pritchard found him there. The town doesn't want you to leave yet. It's November now. January is coming. We need to make a decision about this year's tithe, and you've complicated things. I haven't done anything. You know our secret. That makes you dangerous, but it also makes you a candidate. We could choose you. You fit the criteria. Isolated, no close ties, won't be deeply missed. Or what? Or you stay. You complete your research. You write a report about Coaldale's economic success without mentioning the deal. You become part of our community. And every January you participate in the selection process like everyone else. You become complicit, and in return you share in the prosperity. Marcus wanted to refuse, wanted to maintain his moral high ground. But trapped in Coaldale, with the implicit threat hanging over him, he realized he had no real choice. He stayed. That was 4 years ago. Marcus still lives in Coaldale. He published a paper on the town's economic resilience, attributing its success to unique community cooperation and resource management. The paper won awards. Other economists have cited it. No one questions the specifics. Every January 15th at midnight, Marcus joins the town at the old mine entrance on Ash Hill. They bring the chosen person, the tithe. Sometimes it's a drunk driver who killed someone. Sometimes it's a domestic abuser. Sometimes it's a thief or dealer. People who violated Coaldale's trust. And at midnight, something comes out of the mine. Marcus has never looked at it directly. The townspeople have learned not to look, but he feels its presence. Ancient, patient, hungry. They leave the person at the entrance, and the thing takes them into the darkness. There are no screams, just silence. And every year Coaldale prospers. Marcus's house is paid off now. His salary as a community economic consultant is comfortable. He has health insurance through the town. His retirement is secure. He's integrated into Coaldale's social life, dinners, town events, committees. He's become what he never thought he'd be, complicit in ritualized murder. But he tells himself the people they choose deserve punishment. That society would have imprisoned them anyway. That one death per year is a small price for a community of 1,000 to thrive. He tells himself this because the alternative, acknowledging that he's trapped in a town that made a deal with something inhuman, that he participates in evil for personal comfort, is too much to bear. Sometimes Marcus thinks about running, about trying again to escape. But he's been in Coaldale for 4 years now. He's forgotten how to live without the prosperity, the ease, the security, and January is coming again. The town will make its choice, and Marcus will participate as he always does, because in Coaldale prosperity isn't free. It's purchased. One life at a time. And once you've been part of the purchase, once you've stood at that mine entrance and watched something drag a person into darkness, you can never really leave, not because the town won't let you, but because you can't forgive yourself enough to go. That's the real trap, not the supernatural entity, but what it makes you become. And Marcus has become exactly what Coaldale needed. Another citizen willing to sacrifice others for prosperity, for comfort, for survival. That's the true horror. Not the thing in the mine, but the willingness to feed it.